Hi, my name is Britt Gillman, and I'm the Research Project Analyst at the Deep River Public Library. Since 2022, the Deep River Library and partners have been co-leading this local history project titled Not Born from a Virgin Forest, Deep River and Area's Earliest History. The title of this project is derived from early recorded accounts of Virginia Adams Hunt, who proposed that the area that we now call Deep River had housed families for decades prior to the arrival of the town, and therefore Deep River was not born from a virgin forest. This project was started in response to requests to expand understanding of life in our area prior to 1945. I'd like to thank our partners, the Schoolhouse Museum, the Laurentian Hills Library, Professor Stephanie Adams, Alex Stevens of Deep Tech, the Deep River District Community Foundation, and to the New Horizons for Seniors grant, who generously funded this project and made our work possible. The following oral history that you're about to watch is a subjective first-person account, an individual recording of life in the early days of Deep River and area. We hope that by asking questions and capturing responses, we're able to add these oral histories to our collection of historical accounts to expand understanding. Enjoy. So Brian, thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to chat with you about your family's history. I wanted to know if you could start by just telling us your full name and when you were born and where you grew up.
Well, as I recall, my full name is Andrew Brian Walker, possibly on my birth certificate or something. However, I've been called Brian Walker all my life.
Okay.
Andrew was a family middle name mostly, and I gather with the amount of use it got that it must have been a very favorite of somebody's, because there were many Andrews as middle names.
Wow.
So anyways, for what it's worth, I'm known for all my life as Brian Walker, and on some government mail I still get, it will be Andrew, which is a little confusing, but not a big deal.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. That's good to know, and that's interesting about the Andrew name that's always popping up in your family.
Yes.
So what year were you born and where were you born?
I was born July 12th, 1944, and I believe I was born in the Pembroke Hospital, and at that time my parents had a tiny house behind a gas station that my father had. Now, if you are at the Elms Hotel,
okay.
I think it's called the Bear's Den now, actually.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so the Bear's Den, if you're going from the Bear's Den up the highway towards the dairy, right next to the Bear's Den, my father had a piece of property that went from there up to the Nell Canadian Tire.
Oh, wow.
That was his property, and it went back off the highway a great distance. Now, this was all part of land that was given to my great-grandparents, I would guess, that came to Canada from Ireland, I think probably around the 1850s.
Wow.
And they came and were granted this land, supposedly for farmland, which was a bit of a joke because it was the furthest thing in the world from farmland. But anyways, it was generous. It was a large piece of land, and it went from the Ottawa River back, not quite, to the railway tracks.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big piece of land, and all the pieces along there were the same size. So on one side of our land was a sister of my grandfather's, and beyond that was a brother of my grandfather's. And going the other way, up the highway, there was an uncle, Jack McNulty, who was an uncle of my mother's.
Okay.
Yeah, my grandmother's sister on that side of the family. And so it was absolutely wonderful as a young person having the freedom to use this land at will. And there was a wonderful creek that ran through it. And I and my siblings and our relatives that lived there used this creek for fishing and exploring and just growing up, I suppose.
Wow. So it sounds like you have lots of good memories in that area.
I really do. And like I say, so next to the Bearsden Hotel, my father had a gas station.
Okay.
And that would have been the second one in Deep River. And right behind it, he had built a small house. And this is where my father, my mother, myself, and my brother Gary, who was a little more than a year younger than me,
Okay.
where we lived. And I'm not sure at what age exactly my grandfather, who lived in the big house across from the dairy,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
he passed away.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it was at my grandmother's behest. I expect it was, because she was very much the boss of the family. And when that happened, we moved in with her, and my father leased out the gas station.
Wow.
And he made his first foray into trucking.
So that brings me to one of the first questions that I was curious about. The Walker family name has come up quite often, and being new to Deep River, my first question was, well, are they related to the Walker Trucking and Storage?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He was that Walker. That was J.J. Walker.
Okay.
And J.J.'s father and my father's father were brothers.
All right.
So yeah, we were very, very close. And growing up in my grandmother's house after we'd moved in with her, the only light you could see in the dark of the night, and you could only see it dimly, and that was J.J. Walker's house. And so we lived very close together and spent, as kids, a fair bit of time together.
Okay. That's fantastic. Thank you for answering that question for me.
Now, if I'm going on a bit too long about these things, please stop me.
Oh no, this is wonderful. I was going to say at the beginning that this is a little different because we can't see each other. So I'm listening to you, and although you can't see me, I'm nodding and listening, but I'd really just love to hear you talk. So you are not going on too long at all.
Okay.
Okay. So Brian, I would like to go back and start back with your grandparents. So you had mentioned that big blue house
Yes.
that your grandmother had, and we had heard here at the library that back in the day that this used to be a stopping place for those traveling along the way.
Correct. It was a licensed hotel.
Okay.
And all the traffic, so that house is, I'm not sure, you may have the date of that house. I had it at one time, but my memory fails me on it now, but it's well over 100 years old.
Wow.
And it sat exactly there, and there was a big sign on the front of it facing the highway, and it said Keown's, Keons, Keown's Hotel.
Okay.
Now, that was my father's mother. Her maiden name was Keown, and her father built that house.
Wow.
he had come from Chapel, from Ireland originally, or his ancestors, I'm not sure which, had came from Ireland originally and settled in Chapel, and he came up to what was then called Wiley, and built that house. And across the highway from the house was a large stable, because all the traffic on the highway at that time was horse-drawn.
Right.
So while you put up these travelers for the night, you had to have some kind of accommodation for their horses.
Oh, I guess you would have to, yes.
Certainly.
So do you remember any stories that you've heard from your grandmother about the types of people that were coming and staying at the house?
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
Through a long, long period of time, and after her father passed, he left that house to her and her husband, my grandfather.
Okay.
So that was quite a remarkable leg up in life at that time, if you will.
Yes.
It was not a well-to-do part of the valley, if you will. People lived, off the land as they could. Most people ate wild game. I tell people, even in my early growing up, if we were having a roast of some kind, you could probably find a bullet hole in it.
That makes sense.
You didn't have to worry about any styrofoam being stuck to it.
Right, yes.
And so these people that would travel the highway, there were merchants, of course, in their horse-drawn whatevers, and there were other people just traveling, some on foot. And my grandmother would put these people up for the night. Some people of means, a lot not of means.
Okay.
And she talks about people, as times got harder and closer to the Depression, she talks of people stopping and asking if they had some chores she could do, if she had some chores they could do to earn a meal.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes she would give them, to get them to split some wood for her, or maybe work in the garden. But often as not, she would simply feed them. She was a very generous person and kind. And but at the same time, she knew she was on her way to be the head of this family.
Right.
Because I think most people realized early on that she was smart, and you certainly wanted to have somebody at the head of the family that was smart.
Yes. And probably quite hardworking, it sounds like, as well.
Oh, Lord, she was indeed. Absolutely, and just tireless. I can remember my early memories of her, like she was quite old, and walking to church.
Wow.
Which was where the Catholic Church is. No, just past where the Catholic Church is now.
Okay.
About 100 yards past it. And she would walk there and played organ in the church.
So that's quite a far journey to go on foot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Down and back before breakfast so she could go to communion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, truly, we are such a bunch of cake eaters today compared to those people.
Yes. So other than the hotel, I imagine it would keep your grandmother quite busy, but what were the other sorts of things you did? I know you mentioned that there was a garden there.
They always had big gardens and a root cellar. That's an underground, not building actually, usually more of an excavation but there would be some woodwork involved supporting the roof of it. And in it, you would keep your potatoes and a lot of root vegetables in the winter. And in this, which was closed up, these vegetables wouldn't freeze, and they would keep remarkably through the winter.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
And so somebody from the family, once a week or more often, would be sent to the root house with a basket or a box and told to get potatoes, blah, 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 whatever other, vegetables were in there. And there would be carrots, and like I said, other root vegetables. And this would do you through the winter.
Wow. Before refrigeration.
Before refrigeration, yes, indeed.
That's great. So, did your parents work at this time at the hotel as well?
No, they did not.
Okay.
My father, like I said, when he leased a gas station,
Right.
he bought his first big truck, and he started trucking in the immediate area. And with the building of the town at that time, there was lots of work for men with trucks.
Oh, I bet.
And yes, and so that was very good timing for him. And my mother, of course, Gary and I were born very, very soon into this marriage, and she was pretty busy with that. And then my sister Debbie was next, and she had her hands full.
Oh, I bet.
And in the house, in the hotel, there were two kitchens. One for the for the bar, and the other kitchen for the family. When we moved into the house, we got the family kitchen, and my grandmother, she when it ceased being a hotel, she that kitchen and that bar, that was her kitchen and her living quarters in that part of the house.
Wow.
And even after it ceased being a hotel, my grandmother kept boarders for years. And I remember whole families living with us.
Oh, wow. Children and everything?
I beg your pardon?
I asked if it was children and everything that came to live there.
Oh, yes. One family, the Greens, who were wonderful friends and still are, those that survive, there was the parents and at least 3 children.
Okay.
And Mr. Green was a carpenter, and the children were older than Gary and I, not a great deal, but some older. I remember when Gary and I started to St. Mary's School, at least 2 of the Green boys were there, but like I say, 4 or 5 or 6 years ahead of us.
Wow.
And
That's
then after the Green family moved out and got their own home down the highway, the next people that lived there were a French couple, and he worked at the building of the dam at the Swesha.
Okay. That makes sense.
And the one that I can remember after them were the Evanses, and George Evans, I believe, worked for Atomic Energy, and he and his wife lived with us. They ended up moving only maybe 2 or 3 lots from us up the highway and built a house right there. So they were neighbors and friends for a very long time.
Oh, that's great. Now, is the blue house still in the family, or has it been passed on to other owners?
It is still in the family. I am so happy to tell you.
Oh, that's great. That was my first hope. Because since we are doing this as an audio interview, I was wondering if it would be possible to maybe arrange a visit with Mel.
My brother Glenn, who owns the house now, I don't know if you know him.
I think that Glenn has been mentioned to us, yes.
Well, when my mother passed, I think 7 years ago, she left the house and the property attached to all of us, the 8 of us, and all of us wanted it to stay in the family.
Yeah.
But none of us, except Glenn, wanted to man up. And thank God he did. Because if he didn't, I don't know what would have happened. But somehow, one of us, or we would have got somebody to take it on. You know, we wanted to keep it.
Yeah.
But I could not imagine moving from here back there. You know, as much as I love my family and I have wonderful memories and everything, I had lived out here at that time for 40 years, so
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't conceivable. And two of my other brothers lived down in Georgian Bay, and as much as they loved the valley too and spent lots of time up there every year, they were disinclined also. So good old Glenn, who lived the closest to my mother, he lived just over on Frontenac, and he stepped up.
Oh, well, I'm glad he did too.
Oh, so am I. You know, I couldn't imagine going back there. You know, I often thought, what would it be like going back there and seeing somebody else there? Or would they bulldoze a house and build another house, or I don't know what.
Yeah. It's quite possible. Yeah. And so much time has passed. I wonder if you've noticed, you know, trees are a little taller and there's some new bushes and
Absolutely.
yeah.
And in front of that house, on the highway side of that house, there used to be quite a bit more property before the highway. And I'm not sure what year Department of Highways, it was on a bit of a bend on the highway right there.
Okay.
And Department of Highways decided that it was an unnecessary bend, so they expropriated a big part of our front lawn and took out some incredible big old trees, willows and spruce and pines
Oh.
that had grown there forever and that had swings in them when we were kids. And
That's pretty hard.
it was an upsetting time for everybody in the family, especially my grandmother, who was still alive at the time. It was very upsetting for her. But when these people make up their minds to do something, unfortunately.
That's right, yeah. And to lose a willow, I mean, I find that in this area, willows are so rare. You see them more out towards Beachburg and Westmeath, but I don't see any willows in this area.
Not a lot. Not a
No.
lot. That's true. But there was 2 willows out there. One of them was just massive, and it was, well, where our mailbox used to be, which was straight out from the corner of the house closest to down the highway. And this willow had these monster arms that would have been 2 feet in diameter, and it had a great crown, and there was a swing on one of the branches, and you could swing basically right over the highway.
Oh, wow.
If you were inclined. We weren't encouraged to do that. But I don't know. I guess there had been swings in that tree back to my father's time, probably.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So thinking about, you know, the changes happening there at the Blue House with, you know, the highway bend being removed, I'm curious if your parents, or maybe even some of yourself or your siblings, have any memories about when CNL came to Deep River and the changes that were occurring at that time?
I don't. Like, that was the year. I was born in 44, and I think CNL came there in 45.
You're right, yes. So I guess it would be your parents.
I don't have any memories of that time. The land that the town is built on now was, so the land from my grandparents' house, it went right down to Ridge Road.
Okay.
And Ridge Road if you see, it leaves the highway at 90 degrees.
Right.
That 90-degree line ran straight down to the river.
Oh,
and that was the eastern delineation of my grandparents' property.
Okay.
On the left side of Ridge Road, that whole housing area, when I was a child, that was a huge, big field.
Wow.
There was not one single house there, and we had a road, a sand road, that went from the hotel, our house, down through that field, and then down the hill to the river to Pine Point, which was also owned by my family.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I had heard of this path. Someone had asked me before if I had walked that path, and I hadn't. But that makes a lot of sense now, how it would have been in that area from the stopping place all the way down to the water.
Absolutely. And if and when you have a conversation with Glenn, I know that he will be able to, it'll be much easier for you to visualize it, standing there on his veranda, looking towards the river, and he will point out he'll be able to point out the parameters of that big field there. And I don't know that that field was ever farmed. It was not really arable land. It was just hungry sand. And I don't know at what time. I guess I would have been in my early teens. Two gentlemen from southern Ontario came up and approached my grandmother, and they bought the lion's share of that field and started the first subdivision in that field.
Wow, okay. So was this around the time then that the town was being built for the employees?
No, this was a fair ways after that.
Okay.
There was already, Ridge Road wasn't there at that time. The only entrance to the town was Deep River Road.
Okay, yes, that makes sense.
But most of the housing at that time was downtown, down and around town, closer to the river. And it wasn't until quite a bit later that Ridge Road and Laurier and that whole area, it got built up quite a bit later.
Okay, yeah. It's almost hard to imagine back then there being just so much land and space, whereas now we look and there's houses and new shops. So, yeah, that's very interesting.
So that land, from Ridge Road down to approximately where the Catholic Church is, that was owned by another relative. So the land where the town was built, it had at one time belonged to a relative.
And just to kind of draw a comparison to prices of property now, does your grandmother or your parents remember how much were they offered for that land, especially at Pine Point, such a beautiful parcel of land?
Well, the Pine Point land did not go to those first developers, Rennick and Brown, who built the subdivision in the field.
Okay.
At the end of the field, quite a steep hill went down, and you went down that, and then you got on a flat that went flat to the river. It was probably, historically, floodwater area. I'm sure it was, and that's where. In my grandparents' time, that's where the local natives lived, of course, on the river. Why wouldn't you?
Of course, yes.
You use it for transportation. You use it for food. It was where you'd want to live,
Of course.
So the Pine Point area, I don't remember what year the town bought that. I was well into my teens, and my own selfish little life at that time, and I knew it was happening, but you know, when you're a teenager, you're caught up in stuff closer at hand.
Of course.
And my father kept a lot down there. When they sold the most of it, he kept a lot for a long time, and with the idea of not having a home down there, but just having a summer cottage sort of thing. And anyways, as he got on and was pressured constantly, people wanted to buy that lot of his, and he ended up selling it to some very nice people that we knew, and they built a lovely home down there, and I believe some of their relatives still live there.
Wow. Oh, that's excellent.
But in my earliest memories, when I was very young and not allowed to go to the river by myself, and we would go down there with hard-fought permission, my mother's youngest sister would come down there, and she'd try to convince us not to drown ourselves. And most of my parents had an abiding fear of water.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because that's come up quite a lot in a lot of our interviews, is that some of the folks we were speaking with, they remember as a child a lot of their parents saying to be safe in the water, or there was only certain times they could go in the water. And I'm so curious as to why.
Well, I think there was lots of drownings at that time.
Yeah.
And when I say lots of drownings, it would just be lots, has a relative meaning here. In their lives, they weren't used to people drowning.
Right.
And when somebody did, it resonated, and it just intensified this awareness of the perils of water. And when this sister of my mom's would go down there and look after us, my brother Gary and I, we were the oldest two, and we would venture out a little ways, and on the downriver side of Pine Point, there was a big shallow bay that went out there, and it went out there for 150 yards, I would say.
Oh, wow.
And the water never got to your knees. And then the water shallowed up even a little bit more, and you were standing in a foot of water, and you were standing right on the drop line.
Oh.
This is where the deep channel of the river, this drop line went down into that. And my grandma Walker, when she was first married, and they were farming somewhat, and I believe they were threshing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And water was required because the machinery that that was powered at that time, it was steam powered, so they required a lot of water for these steam engines. And one of my grandmother's brothers, it was his job to take a wagon pulled by a team of horses down to the river, and he would go out in that shallow bay, and he would go out and turn the wagon pointing upriver right at the drop line.
Oh.
And he would stop the horses there, and he would, with buckets, fill the barrels on the wagon.
Wow.
So one of his trips, I don't know exactly what went wrong, but a horse stepped over the drop line.
Oh, no.
Floundered in the water, pulled the other horse in, and the wagon and my mother's brother drowned.
Wow.
And
that's quite stressful.
I hope I'm not mistaken, but I believe his name was Andrew Walker.
Okay.
So that may account for the use, the heavy use of the word Andrew in our names.
Wow. As a tribute, in a way. That would make sense.
But my grandmother, I remember, till she was a very, very old woman, never ever encountered encountered senility or anything like that. Always had the sharpest mind. And one of the greatest regrets of myself and all of my siblings is that we never sat down with her and recorded her remembrances. It was just a terrible mistake.
Yes.
Because she remembered everything so clearly. It was just absolutely wonderful, her remembrances. And she'd go into great detail. She would color these stories so well for you.
Oh, I imagine they were great stories.
Oh, Lord. And as children, we heard these from early times. And I heard them from my grandmother till I was in my 30s. And never tired of hearing them. Never tired of hearing them.
They become quite fond family memories, I find, those sorts of stories, where you want to bring them up again and again.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow, okay. Well, thank you for that story about the water. I think that certainly explains the safety warnings from all of the parents, because back then, the water in the river was powerful. So I imagine that it would be a safety concern much more than it is now.
This is true. However, when we were going down there with my aunt, the dam had been built at the Squasha.
Okay.
At that point, the dam was a functioning piece, and so the river was contained, if you will, below it. It was tranquil like it is today.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And I remember Gary and I, as we got a little older and bolder, we would take inner tubes to the river with us. And I'm not quite sure if my parents knew about that at the time, but we would take them and we would go out to the drop-off and throw the inner tubes off the drop-off and then have to swim and get them. And this is how we taught ourselves to swim.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, if my parents ever saw that, we would never have gone to the river again. I know quite well.
Certainly not.
But anyways, it served us well. And I remember, it was years and years after I was well into my 20s. And my father and mother happened to come down to the public pier one night. And I was water skiing behind a friend's boat. And we came in real close to the pier. And lo and behold, if my parents weren't sitting there in the vehicle about 20 feet as I passed them.
Oh.
Anyways, when I got home quite a bit later that night, my mother was sitting up. And, she was just so distressed that I was out there risking my life doing this. And I said, Mom, I can swim. She said, no, you can't. It was like it was impossible. Walkers didn't swim or something like that. I don't know.
Oh.
But I'm not sure I convinced her at the time. And I think she possibly had to ask for some other people to get them to reassure her that, yes, he can swim.
And then were you okay to go on your own after that?
Well, no. When that happened and I was water skiing, I was much older then. I was 18 or 19 or something like that, and I had been able to swim for a long time, and it was just my parents' overriding fear, that, well, maybe you can swim a little wee bit, but it was in their mind. It was the stuff of movies,
Yes. Oh. So, speaking about at the water there, I know you had mentioned earlier that there were Indigenous families that were living along the river during your parents' time. And I'm wondering if there's any memories in your family of interacting with the Indigenous families at the water.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My grandmother and my grandfather and my father, they were great friends with these people, had grown up with them, and some of them would come up and do seasonal work for my grandmother around the farm, and then for my dad as well. And then, of course, I'm not sure in what year exactly, the town moved them to the Wiley Road.
That's right, yes.
And so down at the tennis court, I believe there are still remnants of an early house of the natives there.
Yes, you're correct. The
Oh,
Adams,
good.
the Adams cabin. Do you remember Henry Adams?
Well, there was a number of Henry Adamses.
Oh, okay. Yes, actually, I've heard this a few times now. I should clarify.
One Henry Adams was my father's age, and they grew up together, were in the army together, went to school together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he was a lovely man, and he had a son a little bit older than me, who was also Henry Adams.
Okay.
And he was also a very, very fine guy. And like I say, he was a bit older than me, but I think it was a sister of his that started to school in St. Mary's with me, and we went through that school together for 10 years. And but at that time, of course, they'd been moved from the river.
Right.
And they were on the Wiley Road, just short of the first hill.
That's right, yeah. So I know you said that they were helping sometimes at the hotel and doing some work. Did you think that maybe some of those relationships changed after they had to move out to the Wiley because they were so much farther away?
No change at all.
Okay.
Not at all. No, not at all. Like I say, they were friends before just about anything. And when I was quite young, my grandmother, I remember, would hire two of the native girls. My grandmother insisted on scrubbing every wall and ceiling of the house in the spring. Spring cleaning was no small thing for her. And she would hire them to come and work with her doing this spring cleaning.
Okay. So was there any trade that happened between them as well, between the Indigenous families and your family? Or was it more of work arrangements as well as your friendships and relationships?
I think it was mixed, really. You know, there were some things that people would just help other people with in those days.
Of course, yeah.
And then there would be other things on a different scale. And my father or my grandfather would go and ask if a couple of them could come and work for a week or, you know, whatever period of time to do whatever it is they wanted to do at the time. Perhaps help with the threshing, you know, or they were putting up a new barn or a new building.
Yeah. And back then, lots of families helped each other is what we've been hearing a lot, is that...
well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they did. And this was most noticeable in times of somebody being burnt out, you know, losing a house or a barn or whatever. And this was not something that I remember. This is simply stories that I heard from my grandmother and my father and mother. And people would go immediately and try to help these people rebuild their lives.
Wow.
It was a tremendous sense of community, and it was because everybody was so poor.
Yes.
You know, and suddenly, here these poor people were that had been friends a long time. They were even more poor now. They had lost their homes.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, when you're at my brother Glenn's house, this is a little bit of a sidebar.
Okay.
When you pull in the driveway right across from the dairy, when you pull in that driveway less than a car length, if you look on your left, so the up highway side, right there before that next house, which belongs to Dave Hanlon and his wife now, before it, there was a log building, partially in the ground, maybe 2 feet of it in the ground, and the rest of it above ground, with a slight pitch roof on it, and it was an ice house.
Oh.
In the winter, my father and my grandfather would cut ice on the river and haul it by horses up and put it in that ice house. There would be a layer of sawdust, a layer of ice, a layer of sawdust, a layer of ice. These cakes of ice would be 2 feet by a foot by more than a foot deep.
Wow.
And this is prior to refrigeration, when the people that lived along the river at that time, that had cottages down there, that would come up from New York State or Southern Ontario, they would come up there for the summer, and instead of refrigerators, they had ice boxes. And this required, in the upper area of the refrigerator, you would put this block of ice, and for, depending on the temperature outside, but for a number of days at least, the cold air which falls would drop down and keep things in the refrigerator somewhat fresh. And I remember vaguely people coming up in the summer and pulling up to my grandfather's house there, my grandparents' house where we lived, and my dad would say, "Oh, somebody needs a block of ice," and would go out to the ice house, which was always kept closed tight to keep the warm out of it, and go in there. And on a hot day, it was just a wonderful place to be.
Oh, I bet. That's where you'd want to be on a hot day.
Absolutely. And these people would want a chunk of ice. So my father and I was there. I can remember vaguely watching him do this sometimes. Go in there and get this big cake of ice and put it in the back of their truck or in the back of the trunk of their car, and they would go down to their cottage there and carve it into a piece that would fit inside their ice box.
Wow. That's quite genius.
Yeah, it was neat. And, like, that went on all up and down the valley at that time. It went on in countless numbers of places. And even when I was 17, and I went to boarding school in North Bay for a year. And I remember just before you got to North Bay, there was a small lake beside the highway, and lo and behold, so I was 16, so that was 1960, and they were cutting ice up there then at that time. So there were still people using it, 1960.
Wow. I had never heard about that technique before, but now I'm very interested to see if there's any photos of those.
We have family photos of it.
Oh.
Of my father and grandfather cutting ice on the river.
Oh, those would be so wonderful to see.
So either Melanie or Debbie, my other sister, or Glenn will have photos. So if you inquire, your best approach would be Melanie. She's the keeper of the brain and most other things.
Okay, great.
She'll know where those photos are.
Okay, that's wonderful. I'll reach out to Melanie and ask about them.
And the photos are incredible. They're just incredibly sharp old black and white photos.
Oh, I can't wait to take a look. So, Brian, earlier when we were chatting, you had mentioned how you had wished that you were able to record your grandmother's stories. And something I was thinking was how wonderful it is that you've given us your time to listen to and record your stories tonight. So my last question that I wanted to ask you was, do you have any kind of wisdom or something that you would pass on to the next generation if you're thinking about Deep River in area and all of the progression that's occurring?
I don't know about wisdom, but it was, in retrospect, the most wonderful place to grow up. Mind you, it was such a different time of the world. Kindness was much more common. People were kinder to each other. And the town, aside from my relatives and my mother's relatives, the town was all made from people from other places, and by and large, most of them couldn't believe their good fortune, coming to live in this gorgeous place on the bank of this beautiful river, and with a built-in employer.
Mm-hmm.
And no, like I say, as far as wisdom to pass on, I don't know about that, but I still think Deep River is it's a gorgeous place. And prior to my mother's passing, my wife and I, we would go back there every March when it was my mother's birthday, and we would stay for 2 weeks. And I would get a whole bunch of family on myself and do some ice fishing and see some old friends that were still there that I'd grown up with and gone to school with, and still lots of relatives in the area as well. And that was very enjoyable. But since my mother's passing, I don't feel the same impetus. I still love every member of my family, and it's a rare day that I don't talk to at least a couple of them. And I'm really blessed now that my youngest brother lives in Vancouver.
Oh, that's wonderful, Brian.
Yeah, it really is.
That's great. Well, thank you. Is there any other last words or memories you would like to share?
Not that I can think of right off. When I moved to British Columbia in 1972, I moved straight to Prince Rupert.
Okay.
And it was a grand little town, and I had heard about it only Prince Rupert was only ever mentioned as a weather joke. That it was supposed to rain more in Prince Rupert than anywhere else in the world, really. And so you heard about that only. And I moved there, and it had a huge native presence.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely huge. A big part of the northern British Columbia, these natives had moved there in hopes of improving their plight, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't usually the case, unfortunately. And I encountered a racism that I was so unprepared for. Because growing up in Deep River, there was no sense of that. When I went to St. Mary's School, from grade 7, from the age of 7 till grade 10, there was a huge amount of Native people my age and younger and older in that school.
That's right, yeah.
And there was nothing but closeness, really. It was nice. And I was so taken aback in Prince Rupert seeing this. There was a hotel there that I frequented, and natives could come in there and sit down. But they could sit there till the cows came home, and they would never get served.
Wow.
And there was 2 hotels on the main street of Prince Rupert that were strictly native hotels.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way this had changed people, this racial thing, these were hotels that you wouldn't go into yourself because you were not welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a terrible thing. And the people that perpetrated that, I don't know what should happen to them.
Yes. So quite a stark contrast from your upbringing.
Oh, absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was not at all prepared for it. And the slagging and the slurs that were in language about natives. You know, it was just so demeaning. It was disgusting.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very, very important to hear.
And I met my wife in Prince Rupert.
Oh, good.
We lived there for 2 years. And did I say 72? I meant 76.
Okay.
76, yes. So I moved there in 72, and in 76, my wife and I moved here accidentally. We came to visit an ex-boss of my wife's, and 2 days into our visit, we saw the piece of property that we live on today, and both of us without jobs, but with recent decent work records, we were allowed to buy this house and property.
Wow. It's not like that today, Brian.
It's so crazy today, you know. I don't know how young people can own homes. When we bought this property, it's 9/10 of an acre. There's a house on it that turned 100 last year, and the property was divided, so there's actually 2 lots, and we have a second house on it that we live in now.
Oh, fantastic.
And in the original house, my wife ran a hugely successful catering business for 33 years.
Wow.
And that house and property cost us $27,000.
That is quite unheard of today.
A house on a piece of land, one house adjacent from ours, sold since Christmas for $1.2 million.
Oh, ouch.
And the house is nothing. It's been kept up nicely on the outside, but the inside is 70 years old, and nothing has been changed in it.
Wow. So I think you got in at the right time then. That's what I would say.
and if there's any lesson in this, just about everything in life is about timing. If you're at the right place at the right time and have a plan, you might do okay.
That's wonderful. That's great advice. Brian, I have really enjoyed this conversation with you. You have such a great memory and your stories were so engaging. So I just want to thank you for sharing this time with us.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed talking to you too, Britt.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. Well, maybe one of these days we'll cross paths again, but I'm going to reach out to Mel and see if we can maybe take a little trip over to the Blue House.
Oh, yes. And don't forget to get Glenn to point out where the field used to be.
Yes.
And if it so suits you, get Melanie to go down to Pine Point with you, and she can point out the old road. And Glenn will also show you where that ice house stood.
Oh, that would be so great. Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Been nice talking to you, Britt.
Yes, you too, Brian. I hope you have a good night. Thank you very much for your time.
Most welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.